Hello sewing friends, and welcome to an episode all about sewing with jersey. Have you got an overlocker? Are you scared to use it? Have you used it once or twice and put it away? Well, then this is the episode for you. I'm going to help boost your confidence in sewing with jersey, stretch, knit and using your overlocker. Let's get started. So for today's episode, I'm going to talk sort of as if you are a beginner or a newbie. You might not be, and you just might want to refresh, but this is an episode for you if you want to get to grips with just having a go. And I'll be honest up front, I have sewn a lot of jersey, but I am no expert. There are some really detailed workshops and courses you can take. Tilly and the Buttons do a brilliant one. So if you really want that sort of deeper dive, then I recommend going to do one of those. But if you just want like a little refresher to get you boosted up and going again, then this is the episode for you. So let's start with some things. First of all, is I would say that there's a few tips which are really important to get started when you're doing this, and then I'm going to go through some ideas with you. So tip number one is make sure you have bought yourself some stretch needles for your sewing machine. I'll put a picture in here, so I'm going to shuffle over a bit and I'm going to put pictures in here as I'm talking. So make sure you've got yourself some stretch needles, because that will give you greater success on your sewing machine. And remember to change them backwards and forwards when you don't need them. Number two, familiarise yourself with your zigzag stitch and your lightning stitch on your sewing machine, because they're really useful to use when you're sewing with jersey. Zigzag stitch is great because it allows that stretch without it pulling, and the lightning stitch gives a more secure stitch when you want to stitch a dart or stitch the end of something and keep it secure. So definitely get to grips and have a look, see if you've got those on your sewing machine. Most of them have, and I'll put pictures in here of the ones I'm referring to. The next thing is get yourself some cheap jersey, sweatshirting, ponte, whatever knit fabric you want to have a go at. Buy some cheap first. Doesn't have to be the pattern or the colour that you absolutely love. So I'm going to put some recommendations up here. Rainbow Fabrics right now still have their 60% off, and if they don't have it when you watch this video, they often do, so keep watching. And that means you can get yourself some jersey for sort of $3.99 or $4.99 a metre if you're in the UK. I'm sure in the US places like Joann's will have offers as well. So watch out for when there's an offer on. And even if you don't know what you're going to do with it, buy yourself some cheap jersey. Dalston Mills, I found some cheap, I think it was as well. Legend Textiles in the UK, great place to find cheap. And it may not be best quality, but that's okay, because what you want is something to practice with that you're not going to be sad if it goes wrong. Might end up being a wearable toile that you can just wear at home when you're doing bits and pieces or housework or gardening or whatever you do, and not worry about it. A lot of other websites have sales too, so just buy something in the sale to help you get to know the feel of the fabric and to help you get used to playing with it. The last thing you want is to spend your money on a fabric you really like and that to be your first go. And my other tip to do with that is buy yourself at least 3 meters, because if something goes wrong, you've got spare, and also you've got room to play with it as well, because the last thing you want is to only have just enough to make what you want. Third tip is to do with buying fabric is look at the weight of it. Jersey and stretch fabric has a huge range. Now I know there's lots of names for it like Ponte, ITY, Scuba. You'll get to learn those feels as you buy them. But what is the most important thing is look at the weight. Anything 200 or over is quite a heavy weight, so it would be more like a sweatshirt, a Ponte, something that really holds itself. Scuba, ITY. If you buy something the lower end of the weight, it will be more t-shirt, and that's the thing to watch out for. Is the weight will affect the drape, it will affect how much it pulls the whole item downwards, because if you sew a top and then attach a skirt, if it's a heavy one, it will pull the weight down as well and it will stretch the top. So really watch out for those things. And again, it doesn't matter if you buy a weight that you're not sure about, because if you buy it cheap, you're learning. And remember, it's like any other hobby. Think about cake making, how many cakes that someone would make and the family would eat because they wouldn't be the right starter cake. if you see what I mean. But over time, they'd get to the one that's worth the world seeing. Think about it like DIY and how many times you might overpaint a wall or re-wallpaper. Same as gardening. How many times have you had a plant not survive? It's no different. So please don't set yourself an expectation that the first thing you sow, it has to be the one. Then my next tip is where to start with a pattern or a book or something like that. So I would highly recommend starting with somewhere where they're going to talk you through the steps, because if you've not done this before, those steps will be really helpful. When I restarted sewing, I got myself the Tilly and the Buttons stretch book. The great thing about this book is it doesn't just have patterns, and it does have a pouch in the back with all the patterns so you can trace them. But what it also does is in each section, as you sew something, it teaches you a new technique. So for example, in the Stella hoodie and joggers, it teaches you about how to sew with sweatshirt fleece and some tips and tricks and how to prepare it, and also gives you advice on stitch settings. And also the great thing about Tilly and Buttons is they don't assume you have an overlocker. So if you don't, then it's perfect, because Tilly tells you how to do it on a sewing machine as well. The other thing that she does is do things like how to sew a buttonhole on knit fabric. So this, I would say, has been a great investment for myself. And if you don't know where to start, it is a great place to start, because when I look at this book, I still haven't sewn everything in it. I have now sewn about 5 or 6 Stella joggers, 3 Stella jumpers. I've sewn the Joni dress. I've sewn the Freya top 5 or 6 times and adapted that into another pattern. I haven't even touched yet the BB skirt or the baseball t-shirt. So if you think of buying a pattern, which is about £14, I've used this, and I paid about £20 for the book. I got more than my value for the money, and I chose to trace the patterns because then if I want to make them for someone else or anything, I've still got them. So that would be my advice on somewhere to start. And the other great thing about this book is there's lots of videos out there on how to sew the things in here. So do have a search for those, because people will have done sew-alongs, etc. If you don't want to start with that book, the other great place to start is Pattern Emporium. Pattern Emporium has really good hints and tips about how to sew with jersey in their instructions. So I've got the walk along trousers, or walk boldly trousers, and in there at the beginning, tips about what to do when the hem and the stitch ruffles, and how to adjust the settings on your overlocker. So pick a company that really talks you through the steps. Do not go for Fibre Mood Society, because although those patterns, you can find them for free or they're good price, they really don't talk to you like you're a beginner. The big four don't talk to you like you're a beginner either. So I would highly recommend picking somebody who is either an indie pattern company like Friday Pattern Company, Helen's Closet, those kind of ones, Tilly and the Buttons, Pattern Emporium, Closet Core, all of those companies who will give you the hold your hand through the process. So that's where to start. Next tip, cut a bit of fabric and just put it through your overlocker. 2 pieces together, snip a bit off and just put it through and start to get the feel of how the machine works. Don't try and actually sew anything, just get the feel for it. Twiddle the knobs, see what happens. Now, I don't know, I know one of them's called the differential, I think. Doesn't matter, you don't need to know. Just start finding out what happens. And that's an important thing. Learn how to thread it as well. And don't be frightened if it doesn't work first time, because sometimes you'll have just missed one little notch or something and it will come unthreaded. And make sure you have spare needles. If they didn't come with the overlocker, get yourself some, because at some point it will break. And it does, and I've had it break, and sometimes you don't even know why. Next tip, don't use pins, use clips. I'm putting some pictures in here, because using pins, it is too risky for one of them to get into the blade. You'd need to wear goggles, because if one gets in the blade and snaps, or it will blunt the blade, or it will bend the plate underneath. So my recommendation is, particularly until you're confident, is make sure you use clips. And even like myself, I am now, I don't know, I'm into the decades of the amount of jersey I've sewn, I still use clips because it is too risky to forget a pin is in there. Next thing is to work out how you want to start and finish your edges. Now I'm going to put a video in here while I'm talking about two techniques. So one is to like sort of merge like you're merging onto a motorway, and so when you go back round to the other end you'll come over that bit again, so you put it in and sort of start sewing. The other one is I've seen is to cut a snip, put it in and then start. Now I prefer the merge version because it means I can tidy it up when I come back round and it's less definite, but work that out by practicing for yourself. And the same with finishing. I like to sew just past where I started and then turn it at 90 and go out. So practice starting and finishing before you make anything. Next tip for you is learn if your overlocker can have the foot adjustment adjusted depending on the thickness of the fabric you put through. Now on my Janome, I'll put a picture in here, there's a black knob at the top, and depending whether you turn it clockwise or counterclockwise or anti-clockwise to whether to how it lifts the foot up, because when I was sewing some really thick chunky fabric I needed to have less pressure, so it lifted the foot up and then I turned it back to bring it back down again, because jersey and knit fabrics can really vary, and the last thing you want is it not being able to cope with the thickness underneath. Now this is a very personal preference, is threads. Some people will buy 4 overlocking threads in every colour that they sew. So for example, this on the inside is red, so they would buy red for that. When they're sewing green, green, and so on. I personally do that on the odd occasion where the seam might be seen, like if I was doing a t-shirt and you could see around there. But the rest of the time I choose to use variegated thread, and I'll show you. So here we go, variegated thread. Look, there's some threads that need snipping off there. So I choose to do that, A, because it brings me joy on the inside, and B, because it means I don't have to be constantly changing the thread on my overlocker. There are some good selections of variegated threads. You can get a lighter end and a darker end, like a pastel, but it's a very personal preference and you need to decide where you stand on that. Remember also that a lot of fabrics, although this might be red on the outside, might be white on the inside, so you'd actually want to stitch it white anyway. So really have a look and a think about that. But when you're practicing, I wouldn't worry too much about it, because in a way you'd almost want to see what you're doing to get the hang of it. Maybe buy some cheap ones, some moon thread or something to start with, or some if you can find them in a charity shop, till you get the hang of it. Next tip is get used to how to unpick an overlocking stitch. It is a pain. I have my own personal preference. I'll put a video in here of how I do it, but look it up if you're not sure, but get used to it, because you will, like any other aspect of sewing, you will end up having to unpick things, so get used to it. Right, let's get on to some actual makes, etc. So let me show you one of the very first things I made when I restarted my sewing journey was these Tilly and the Buttons Stella joggers. Look at the stitch inside, it's really visible. I've already had to repair them once because I wasn't so good then at doing it. There's still threads hanging out here. The elastic has already come apart once inside and I've had to repair that as well, hence why there's threads poking out. But this was a great practice make because it helped me learn how to put in an infold pocket like this, to put a cuff on, and to work out the length of the pattern. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this colour on me, but as I'm wearing it in secret pyjamas, not bothering if I get a spill down it when I'm cooking, they were a perfect first practice. I'm now going to put a video in here because I made the Joni dress, which is in the Tilly and the Buttons. It did not work for me, but it was a good practice at learning how to do a twist and following a more complicated instruction and sewing a whole dress on an overlocker as well. This was done all on an overlocker apart from the basting. Now the basting, you've got two ways to do that. You could overlock it, or you could go back to your sewing machine with your stretch needle on. Once I'd made those, then I progressed on to a fabric I really liked, which was this one, and made these, and I had a little go and managed to put piping down the edge. and I put a different kind of cuff on. That's the thing to be aware of, is that you can buy pre-made cuffing as well. And you can see there how I put that on, but you need to think about how you're going to finish the edge here. And this is why I talk about the lightning stitch, because the last thing you want in that pressure point there is that coming unstitched. So having a lightning stitch there just keeps it secure. Once I've done that, I then have made a lot of Stella joggers. I've made them like as pyjamas in like a t-shirt weight fabric. I'm wearing today, which I'll put a picture on here, of a brushed back sweatshirting. So once you get the hang of it, you can start using a wide range. So if you think about using a stretch jersey, you go right from the end where it's like a t-shirt weight and it's quite flimsy, all the way to like French terry. Sorry, the sun is coming and going and it's making it tricky. All the way to French terry, which doesn't have much stretch but still works perfect. So my friend, who is an incredibly proficient sewer, or sewist, depending on how you describe it, started life by teaching herself how to sew underwear. I mean, what a place to start. But get scared when sewing things solely on an overlocker. So things like doing a circle round an arm, the way to avoid that is to put the arm in when the top is still laid flat out. The great thing about that is in the Till in the Buttons book teaches you how to do that. And I would say that that is a great place to start. And you know what? I may almost always do my arms like that now, even when the instructions don't say to do it like that. So I'm just going to show you a picture of what I mean. Here where you can see, look, you set the sleeve in when the thing's still open. I do that almost all the time, whether it's stretch or woven now. Obviously you will have this tighter edge here, and that does take practice, but that's why it's really important to use the clips, to really follow a good pattern that teaches you how to quarter something, so that when you're stretching it round, you get the hang of it. But practice. You don't need to make a full outfit to practice doing a cuff. Just sew yourself a little loop. Please remember, as I've said all the way through, that the things we often see from people's makes on Instagram and YouTube are the finished product after years or months or days or whatever of practice. So please don't put that pressure on yourself. Make yourself a mini sleeve. Practice doing this until you're happy with it. And the other great thing as well is no one will know if it goes wrong unless you tell them. So if you don't shout about it, no one will know that this is your third attempt at doing the sleeve. As joggers I'm wearing today, I unpicked a part of one of the leg cuffs and redid it because I didn't like it. Sometimes I will find that I'm not happy with the quality of like the size, so I'll just go over and fully overlock all the way down and nip it off, because remember, the blade will cut it all the way off for you and no one will ever know there was a previous seam there. Now, while we're talking about blades, it's definitely worth learning if on your overlocker you can take your blade down, because sometimes you might not want it to cut it. So I'm not going to go into that in detail today, but just be aware of that. So once you get the hang of it, what else can you do? Well, I made this entire dress using my overlocker. It's a twist front dress. I'll put a picture in here. I've made many variations of this. All of it is done on my overlocker, apart from any hems that I do, such as a neckband. So I'll show you the neckband here, which I did just using a zigzag stitch around here. Now there are choices when you do things like that. So you could twin needle, you could just do a zigzag, you could put like this, like a neckband on. So I'm not going to go into detail on that today. I'll talk about another day about finishing. I'll come back and do that for you, because today is about getting you started. Then of course I've made things like these jumper dresses, fully made on the overlocker, including putting cuffing on. Now this here is called ribbing. So if you don't know what that is, go and have a search for cuffing or ribbing, and it's really too useful to use if you don't want to use the same fabric, having some ribbing at the neck and at the cuff. So that would be my other tip for today, is familiarise yourself with ribbing or cuffing. They're the two words that can be used for it. And the word tubular ribbing means it comes in a tube. So I'll get some to show you. So as you would expect, tubular ribbing comes and makes a tube. So there's the tube, but it's great because you can cut off what you need and then you've got more left. When I'm making a cuff, I always cut double the width, because then you can double the cuff to give it good strength when you're doing that. And again, I'll do that in another episode for you, but just to help you know, it'd be worth grabbing yourself, when you're looking for good price things, some tubular ribbing. So you're raring to go now, aren't you? You're ready to try this out. You need to get yourself some good price fabrics. So here are some suggestions for places to go. I know I've mentioned a few already, but let's do it again. So Rainbow Fabrics, watch out for when they've got the discounts on. At the moment it's Xmas 23, which takes 60% off things. That means you're buying a fabric for sort of £3 or £3.99. And obviously if that's out of date when you come back to it, just go back and have a look, because their offers come and go a lot. The other great place to look is Pound Fabrics if you're in the UK. Pound Fabrics, again, varies their offer. They have their tubular ribbon, which is always a very reasonable price. I think it's £4.99. But they often have fabrics like this one, which I got. It was a quilted one. That was, I think, £4.99, and it's a great practice one if you want something a thicker weight. They have their sweatshirting comes on offer as well. They've got some sort of sportswear fabric at the moment. It's like £1.99 or something, and not worry about it. I mean, I got this in the Rainbow Fabrics Christmas sale. It's a French back, so it's a loop French back fabric, so it's looped on the back, so it's not got a huge amount of stretch, if any, very limited, but I would sew that as like a summer jumper on my overlocker. This I got from the swap table, this fabric here. So that's one of the other things, is if you go to an in-person or a virtual social, watch out to see if there's a swaps table. Don't feel bad about taking a jersey fabric that may not be your most loved fabric, but if it's there on the swaps table, that means someone else is happy for you to have it. Take it to use as a practice. You could search Vinted. Vinted often has fabric on it as well, or watch out on people's D-stash. But some people's D-stash is expensive. To just think about how much it would work out per metre, because you could fall into that trap of buying a fabric you really like and then be sad if it goes wrong. So I hope that has given you some ideas to get started with using your overlocker, sewing jersey on your overlocker, French terries, sweatshirting, ponte. They're all incredibly forgiving. The final tip I have for you is, if there are pleats or darts, do those on your sewing machine, because you can use a straight stitch or the lightning stitch, and think about how it finishes. I find with a dart, a straight stitch is absolutely fine because it's not going to get a lot of pull. If you're doing a pleat, I would consider either finishing it or doing it with a lightning stitch, because it will cope with the pulling there. But as I say, do it in not your favourite fabric, wear it around the house and see how it goes. I think that once you've got started on this, you will love it, and you will start to look at patterns like I do that are woven patterns and think, can I make that in jersey and leave out the zip? I do this a lot. I'll attach a video in here of the seasons of East Summer in New York where I've done that. I did it with things like the Donny shirt and the patina blouse to see if you can, and the answer is yes, you can. I know people who've done the peony dress in jersey, ponte. You can do trousers. Once you get started, you will look at things in a different light. Think about like a dress, like a nice sort of column style dress. If you did that in a ponte, you won't need like an opening at the back, because as long as there is enough room to get your head in, and it's got a bit of stretch, there will be give to go over things. You will end up falling into a world of wonderful fabrics and choices. I'm going to put some pictures in here of some of the things I've made, and the fabric you use can really change the look of the same pattern, and that's why I love it so much, is because one pattern can become so versatile depending on the weight of the jersey, the pattern, the drape, all of those sorts of things. And I think if you're thinking, oh, I don't want to do a zip, oh, I don't know, or I haven't got one, but I love this fabric. And sometimes people say to me, But there's not so much choice in stretch and jersey fabric. There is, it might just be you're not seeing it, because it might be you're so used to looking for wovens that you don't spot it. So I'm just going to put some pictures in here at the end of just some great fabrics out there right now that are jerseys and stretch that you could use and play with. Next time you go to an in-person shop, have a look as well. Get yourself in the mindset of looking and spotting something, because it's a whole new exciting world. I hope that's been really useful. Do leave me a comment below if you've got any other tips, and do go and have a look at some of my other videos that I've created about this subject. Bye.